Well, because I do a lot of work in popular culture, I'm often using video clips, screen grabs, things like that. So having something that allows me to bring that into the room is very important. So I tend to use PowerPoint just because I know that I'm going to find that on conference computers if something else happens, that I can usually do that. But something like that or Prezi that allows me to bring that kind of material in. So it's a more illustrative use of the materials. I'm not a paper reader. I tend to present and sort of try to think of it as teaching when I do presentations. What I don't do as much within a conference that I think we could do, but we just don't. It's not my choice, but we're also not organized that way, is we don't use it in any of the kind of collaborative ways that, if you're talking about what I do in classes with technology, the collaborative opportunities that are afforded and the ways you can, for example, now, if I want students to read through a text, I find ways that I can convert it into a Google Docs so they can annotate it as they read, and then we can bring those annotations into class and talk about it.
Do you find that sort of teaching multimodal composition is a good way to foster collaboration among students in a first-year writing class?
Definitely, because if you have the benefit of teaching in a computer lab, and especially a learning space like ours, which is basically a living room. It's very feng shui with rolling whiteboards. Even the smart board is movable, and they're on laptops. So you constantly have students standing over one another, joining at tables where it's circular. They're in pods instead of a traditional classroom format, pulling out equipment and collaborating in groups.
The other thing I will say, obviously, and this is sort of the other thing that technology allows you to do, is the degree to which we can do more multimodal kind of work now and have that videos, images, and so forth really easily is so substantially different from when I started. My first 4 Cs, I can remember, and this was like mid-90s, flying and writing by hand, finishing my presentation, writing it out by hand. So, there's a huge difference there. So that's, to me, that's the substantial difference between the two, is that idea of the performance and the presentation versus the kind of more collaborative, distributional, and multimodal work I might be doing in the classroom. And multimodal composing. And obviously that's something I'm not doing at a conference. I'm doing it myself, but I'm not doing it with the people in the audience.
And I've been thinking about this for some time now, 5, maybe 8 years, noticing how people deliver in a different way their content. And I remember distinctively Cynthia Haynes using her iPod and just holding it up like this and reading, to everyone while she's showing a video also. I remember the first time, when someone brought, it was first time for me. Other people were talking about it, it was first time for them too. Someone brought a computer, laptop, and actually read his paper, from the computer, and it was jarring. It was amazing, but it's commonplace now. We've gotten used to it. There's something that I like to do. Normally, what we are supposed to do when we're at a conference is to report the results or the ongoing results of our research. We have a question, and then this is the answer. We have a problem, and then this is the solution or a suggested solution. What I like to do is to think out loud my thoughts about my research, what's in process, and I might have 5 different answers to the question. But what I do is I prepare a paper, but I also create a video, And the video is without any audio whatsoever. And I try to find a way to make the video, the images, in as montage or collage all mixed up together, okay? And the meanings come through the juxtapositions. I try to write a paper that conceptually puts forth ideas and create the video for a visual sense of what is being said and collected, okay?
Do these technologies change how, let's say, C's works? Maybe the dynamic between speaker and audience, or the way in which ideas are formulated, or you were talking about transitions and spatial relationships, even the ways in which we might piece together or illustrate the connections between ideas in a new way?
The answer for me would be absolutely it transforms these things, right? Because I don't think that you can have a change in the mode of representation without a change in the relation to thought, right? I don't think that they can be separated in any sort of clean, easy way and say, no, they're not interdependent, right? But the question is to what extent and how that process works, right? And so one thing we see emerging more recently are things like people who are reading a paper in a very traditional sense. The irony, right? It's a presentation, and they show up to read a paper, which isn't the way presentations are meant to be to begin with. Right? So it's the media of text, right? Print has already sort of come to bear on that situation. Right? But so they start to read a paper, and they include a video component with no sound, or sometimes with sound, that is designed to just sort of flow along behind them. And that the juxtaposition of their performance in text and reading of the text in relation to the visual imagery, right, is a way of thinking about idea and the representation they're trying to offer. It is half performance, half sort of like correlative act, half relationship, right? Where it becomes interesting to me is when the technology that's used, whether it be a written paper or otherwise, right, is fundamental to offering a different kind of representation, right? A change in the way we think about the information being presented to us, and therefore a change in the way in which we represent our ideas, which is to say, hopefully, performance and a development of a change in thought. But when someone like Ann Wysocki does a presentation where she uses Photoshop as her presentational medium, and she turns on and off layers as she's talking through her talk, and it tells us a number of things, right? Not just that these things are sequential, right? Because they may or may not be, in fact, ordered in a very particular kind of way, but that all the meanings in the entirety of her talk is always already present on the screen. It's just a matter of what's being shown and what's not, right? So it's a way of thinking about knowledge, and this argument is not being something that develops in a sequential pattern, or something that develops at point A to point B to point C, like a cause-effect kind of logic, or effect-cause kind of logic, right? But rather, these things are always immanent with one another, that they're all in the same plane, that they're all part of the same structure. So the dynamic for me between technologies, whether it be at conferences or even in the field, is fundamental to the ways they allow for new kinds of representation, which is to say, hopefully, that allows for new kinds of thought and new directions for our scholarly thinking, for the potentials of rhetoric or epistemology or ideology or whatever it is we want to study, right? And yes, I think any time that I've had those kinds of encounters, that's been probably the moments that I would say move me the most, but because it's a crisis of faith, right? Or a moment of being everything sort of in question, or a loss, right? A sense of bewilderment and excitement, because you're like, what are you going to do, right? Look at all this cool stuff that I can do, and I don't even know where to start. So it becomes, to me, that is what becomes of those moments. That is the moment, right? And that is the movement, even. And then now, right? This is what I attempt to do when I teach, to try and put students in a situation where the style of that engagement is at the forefront. Whether or not that's successful is yet to be determined, but I think putting us in those kinds of situations is fundamental to how technologies ask us to work and to think differently.
For the past, I guess, 6 or 7 years, when I have been invited to be a featured speaker, what I'll do is write the paper, of course, and then put it like, use HTML, right? And then I put pictures in, I put sound in, and so on. So what I will show, that will be up projected on a screen, and I'm standing there and I'm reading it, and people are not necessarily watching me, but they're watching, the words as I read them, and they're looking, and I really complicate the matter too, because there may be a sidebar, okay, which I may jump over and read half of and then jump back, to the so-called main text. But it's a mixture of music. Music in the background is playing as well. And it's being able to see the page as if it's the Book of Kells. Okay. I use lots of different colors. That's all. So that's another possibility, I think, besides showing slides or whatever else is done today.
The other thing that I think, and this is on my mind because this is what I presented at the conference, is again this idea of antecedent genres. And while we think about that in terms of writing, even among ourselves, we don't think about the fact that if we're putting things on screens, for all of us, our antecedent genres are in popular culture. Film, television, video games. And yet, so many times at conferences, and for students often go to these antecedent genres, whether we want them to or not, and I think we need to acknowledge that and teach with that. But that's a different thing. But I think in presentations, we should be thinking about, well, why do they do this on film and television and so forth? What could we do to make this more of a performance? And I think too many people think that it shouldn't be an entertaining performance and that is somehow anti-intellectual, where my feeling is I want to be thoughtful and intellectual and analytical, but I'm also here, somebody said to me at a guest lecture I did, well, aren't you, doesn't this just lead to wanting to entertain students? And I said, why wouldn't I want to entertain, why wouldn't I want people to be engaged and entertained and enjoy this? So that I think we need to think a little bit about that too when we use the technology and how we can think about the ways technologies are being used in other forms as well.